And are we ready? Perfect.
Okay. Okay, good morning and welcome to our El Monte City School District Annual Board Retreat today, Saturday, July 30th, 2022. I call the meeting to order at 8:07 a.m., beginning with roll call. Mrs. Cobian,
Present.
Mrs. Mendez Garcia,
Present.
Mrs. Rivas,
Present.
Mr. Segrist,
Present.
and Ruedas present. We will continue on with our flag salute, and if we can have Mrs. Rivas lead us in the flag salute today.
Please stand. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Rivas. And we will continue now with our section beyond today's agenda, closed session, beginning with A, item pursuant to conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9, subdivision D2, one case, and B, item pursuant to Government Code 54957, public employee appointment, assistant superintendent of educational services, and assistant principal. We will be right back. Thank you.
Edna, you'll let us know when, or Polly, you'll let us know when we can get started?
We're good.
These are loud. Now I think maybe test.
1, 2, 1, 2, 2.
Test 1, 2, 3. Test. Okay, maybe we'll just have mine a little further away and we're good to go. Okay, are we ready?
We're ready? Okay,
you.
perfect. Okay, so good morning. We will resume our open meeting today at 10:06 a.m. And during closed session, we discussed items A, pursuant to conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9, subdivision D to one case, and B, item pursuant to Government Code 54957, public employee appointment, assistant superintendent of educational services, and assistant principal. No action was taken. Moving on, we will continue with our communications section and with item number 1. Is there any public comments at this time? No public comments. Thank you, Ms. Etna. Moving on to any written communications.
No written communication has come forward.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Okay, continuing with board member communications, beginning with Mrs. Cobian.
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cobian. Mrs. Mendez Garcia.
Just a brief comment. I've really enjoyed that the city of El Monte has been offering such great opportunities, summer events for families. And so I just really want to thank the city of El Monte and also the Parks and Recreation Department for all like the movies at the parks that they're doing, and then the Great Farmers Market incorporating, and the different bands that they're having, and then the different community events and outreach that they're doing.
Thank you, Mrs. Mendez Garcia. Mrs. Rivas.
I'd just like to welcome back, or give a welcome back to our administrative team. I hope you all were able to take a break over this last month. And, we keep making jokes about this early Saturday morning meeting, but thank you, Dr. Garcia, for including the board kind of as part of the kickoff to the new school year. So I wish everyone a wonderful new school year.
Thank you, Mrs. Rivas. Mr. Segrist.
Yes. Happy Saturday, everybody. I came back from Mexico, and I was sharing in Mexico with a lot of people there about our dual immersion program. And in our community, our Vietnamese population, which is very large and growing, there's a lot of interest in beginning a dual immersion program in Vietnamese in our community. And to show how you can advertise, I saw a bus in Pasadena. On the back of it said, "Come to Pasadena Unified and learn French." They have a French immersion program. So welcome back, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Segrist. And I would just like to thank the El Monte City School District and the Communications Department on doing an amazing job letting our community know about the Back to School event that is happening actually today at El Monte High School with our partnering organizations. So thanks to them for partnering with us, and I hope that we get a great turnout and many. Hello, testing. Perfect. Thank you. And I hope that we get a great turnout, and many of our El Monte City School District families also join and take advantage of back-to-school supplies and their backpacks. So thank you.
Good idea.
Moving on, we will continue with our facilities master plan. So with that, I will pass it over to Mr. Jose Herrera.
Tracy.
Yes, he's checking
Okay.
on the microphones, but let me just introduce, I guess, the work ahead, for the next hour. We're gonna have a wonderful presentation from Mr. Herrera, who's really gonna lay out, some things that we will be considering and looking into as a board. I'm so excited, to update our master's facility plan, and as you know, we have some guests in the audience with us because we've selected an architect firm that's going to be accompanying us on this work, and really looking forward to engaging our community, engaging the board, all stakeholders to just continue to move the district forward. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Herrera.
All right, thank you, Dr. Garcia and members of the board. While we put the presentation up, I think you have a copy of it in front of you. We can go ahead and get started. So I just want to point out board policy, our 7000 series discusses the master plan component. It is something that we should be updating regularly. We last updated our facility master plan back in 2008. So a lot of things have transpired in the past 14 years. And we're happy to be partnering with Perkins Eastman, who will be assisting us as a consultant, the architectural firm, in updating our master plan as we move forward. So as it notes there in our board policy, obviously we want to strive to have a school facility master plan in place that meets the district's educational goals. And we should review that regularly to make sure that the educational programs are aligned to the existing facilities and financing and demographic needs. So in the presentation today, I will give a brief overview of how we've spent some of our bond dollars over the past few years, what our enrollment numbers look like currently, where we've come from, and where we see ourselves moving forward. We will be developing formal enrollment projections that we'll bring back to the board that will help to inform our master plan. As we develop our master plan, we want to make sure that the projects that we initiate moving forward will not only be the best use of the funds, but as we look 20, 30, 40 years down the road, will meet the educational needs of the community given our student enrollment. So what are some of the elements that come into the master plan, right? So the enrollment, the student enrollment is a key component of that, and the determining the number of permanent classrooms that we currently have in the school system is quite important. Looking at the number of relocatable classrooms as well. We've made a lot of progress in our school district when we look at the number of portable classrooms as we modernize our schools over the past 20 years or so. A lot of those portable classrooms were either removed or converted into permanent classrooms. I have a slide later in the presentation that looks at that, but about 80% of our classrooms are permanent classrooms, and about 20% of them are portable classrooms. Another important element of the facility master plan is identifying the necessary facility improvements. That's the most exciting part, making sure that we go through and identify those projects, and then prioritizing which projects we should act on and move on first. Now, the part that excites me the most is, as a finance person, is the funding component of it, right? So once we go through this process of identifying the need in our school system, we look at what available resources we have. I'll touch on that later in the presentation. We have about $80 million of bond funds out there that we can access over the remainder of this decade. And that's where the board and the district administration will look at what the need is out there. We'll identify a cost for the existing needs out there in our school district. And if there is a shortfall, that's something that the board can consider down the road if we should entertain moving forward with additional funding resources, putting another bond on the ballot going forward, and things like that. So this master plan will help to inform what the needs are in our school district. We have existing funding out there, and then we'll look at what the future needs are as we move forward. One of the areas, actually there's many areas that our facility master plan looks at as we move forward with updating our master plan. I listed there a couple different categories that we will look at, but that's, it's not a list that includes everything, but as you can see there, when we talk facilities, it's very expansive, right? There's about 30 or so, maybe 40 items on there. And this is items that we'll look at in addition to the programs that we operate, right? So I think the time to update our facility master plan right now, the timing is great because we're coming out of COVID, right? The needs of how we approach education looks a little different. We're looking at expanding our TK for all 4-year-olds as we move forward. What's the impact on our facilities there, right? And we're at a point where we can look at the new programs that will be rolling out and how that fits into our existing facilities. Now, we're aware of the 14 schools that we currently operate, but this is a good depiction of all the other properties that the district owns across the district. We have 3 schools, Loma, Norwood, and Mulhall, that have since been repurposed, right, over the years. And we also have the district office, right, that we currently have, and our central kitchen. We also operate off of Asher Street by the central kitchen. We have our SELPA headquarters located there, right? So it's not just the 14 sites that we look at in this facility master plan. We look at all of our property and say what the need is in there and what the uses of those facilities as we move forward. Now, another component of it is the enrollment, right? And looking at whatever improvements that we do with our facilities will not only just meet our needs in the short term, but in the long term. When you make facility improvements, let's take, for example, this building here, right? Cost us about $10 million when we issued the bonds to construct this wonderful professional development center. And we hope that it's going to be, here for the next 30, 40, 50 years, right? So when we do facility improvements, it's something that they're very long-term improvements, and we want to make sure that we have a good handle on the variable that is student enrollment, to make sure that we are investing our dollars in the areas where it needs to be invested, not only for the short term, but for the long term. So as we look at our facility capacity across all of our 14 active schools currently, you'll see there that we have about a little over 500 classrooms across the district. About 80% of them, I would say, are permanent classrooms, and about 20% of them are portable classrooms. Now, the mix between permanent and portable classrooms is a little different between school to school. You'll see some schools have none, some of them have a rather higher count. And if you look at our maximum student capacity, right, in theory, we could operate our schools at a maximum student capacity of 13,000. Obviously, they would be very crowded schools, right? But in theory, if you look at 25 kids per classroom, that's roughly what the calculation comes out to. And I put that information on the right column so you can look at the student enrollment where we're currently at in 2021-22. I'll get into the enrollment later on in the presentation so you can look at where we project we will be in the upcoming years. Unfortunately, we continue to have declining enrollment that's hitting our school districts, and the birth rates don't have promising information where we think it'll turn around anytime soon. Our facilities have come a long way over the past couple of years. We have some pictures here of what our facilities look like, many decades ago, and even prior to modernization and post-modernization. And it's exciting to see that once we update this master plan and start implementing some of our bond dollars again, looking at our facilities and what they look like post-modernization compared to what they look like currently, right? So we look at some of the buildings, and as we walk our campuses, you'll hear staff say, oh, the new building, right? Well, that building's not so new, right? It's 20 years old, right? And so a lot of the modernization that we've done the past 10, 20 years, we're in need now for upkeeping them. Some schools and some areas of certain campuses more than others. Now, we've spent about $146 million roughly of bond funds over the past 15, 20 years or so. What's not included on here is the investment here at the district office. So if we were to add that, it bumps the number up to about $160 million or so. And that's, you can see more or less when the last major improvement is that was done at each respective school site. You'll notice a trend there as we went later and later into the 2000, 2010 decade, the cost went up. And we can just imagine once we go through this master plan process and we assess a dollar amount, especially the way inflation is looking at this way these days. If you look at, for example, Columbia, right, and the modernization that we did there back in 2008, If we were to do that same modernization now at Columbia or another school, I would imagine that the cost would probably double, right? We're seeing 10% inflation year over year, and a lot of these numbers are reflective of projects that we've done over the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Now, we do regularly set aside 3% of our budget annually to maintain our facilities, right? So the bond program has helped us over the past 20 years to do major improvements, and annually we set aside a few $1,000,000 a year to regularly upkeep our facilities, right? So, and I think that that's really important because as taxpayers, as community members, they are funding the bond program, right? It's their property tax dollars that are funneled into the district for facility improvements. And we want to make sure that we are good stewards of the funds and that we keep the facilities in good repair. And the district has done a good job of doing that over the years with our wonderful maintenance and facilities team that we employ. Now, to give an overview of how the voters have supported us over the years, this slide, the board has seen it before, right? There's 4 measures that have been passed over the past 20 years or so, the dollar amounts and how much funds remains. We've refinanced over the years and saved the voters quite a bit of funding. So the 4 bond measures that have been passed over the past 20 years or so have authorized about $240 million of bond funds that are earmarked for facility improvements. We've spent about $160 million of that. The remaining $80 million will be able to access over the next, I would say, 8 years or so. We actually, a few months ago, the board authorized us to take out some bond funds, and we have $10 million ready, waiting in the bank to move forward. As soon as we get this master plan updated, we're ready to hit the ground running with that funding. The reason we moved on that prior to the master plan was due to the interest rates, and we were able to pull out those $10 million of bond funds and secure a low interest rate prior to all these interest rate hikes. But we don't want to put those funds to use until we have a master plan that can help guide the investment of those dollars. Like I said, we've refinanced many times over the past 15 to 20 years or so, and we've estimated to have saved the voters about $10 million, right? So I think that that goes a long way, and if we entertain future bond measures in the future, right, I think that's information that we can share with our community. They not only see that we've upkept our facilities in good repair, but also we've been good stewards of the funds, and whenever the opportunity has arisen, we've pursued refinancing to lower the cost of debt issuance. Now, here's information on the historical assessed valuation. This is promising news because when you have property growth, you can access your remaining bond funds quicker. And if you issue future bonds in the future, the higher assessed valuation you have, the more funds the voters can theoretically approve for facility improvements. Now, on the flip side of that, when property valuations are high, that does lead to a high cost of living, right? So I think it is impacting us in both regards. It's good that our property valuations are increasing in the city of El Monte, but we also are aware of that our enrollment is declining, and that is one of the factors that I think is impacting a lot of family members and community members and their ability to continue to reside within El Monte. The county assessor recently came out with the number for the 2022 year, and El Monte had a 5% increase year over year. So that makes it 12 consecutive years with positive gains in assessed valuation. So we've had pretty stable growth in the community. As we move forward and look at the enrollment, enrollment statewide has grown as we moved on from the 70s into the 80s and 90s. As we hit the 2000s, it plateaued, and there's projections that as we go forward into the next decade and beyond, enrollment K-12 statewide will be declining. Now, LA County has a different story, right? And so we saw a lot of that same trend that we saw statewide with enrollment increasing in the 70s, the 80s. We peaked in the 2000s or so, and then enrollment in school systems across LA County started to decline pretty severely in the past 15 to 20 years. And we've seen that in El Monte. I have some information that we'll go over later in the presentation. Now, when we look at state population trends, in the state. It's been pretty stable in recent years. 2020 actually was the first year that we didn't see significant growth, and we think that was due to the pandemic. We do have an aging population, and you'll see that as the population continues to age, right, that there's projections that the statewide population for all ages will continue to increase in future years. Now that's good news. However, and we'll see something similar in LA County as well. However, when we look more specifically at school-age children, it tells a different story, right? So if we're to look at the population trends with our infants, right, you'll see there's a decline there, right? And the same thing would be true as we look at our kids that are about to be entering kinder or TK, kids that are in the lower grade elementary, and kids that are in the upper elementary middle school, right? So as we look more specifically at Monte, this is a slide that I didn't want to share with the board. They've seen this before. It's updated to show the latest birth rate information. It was quite surprising to see our 2020 birth rates in El Monte decline by 13.5% when compared to 2019. That's the largest decline we've seen going back to 1990s or however back we went on this slide, right? So we were seeing an average of about 3.8, close to 4% year-over-year declines going back the past 30 years or so. The past decade or so, the rate of decline increased to about 5.5%. For the latest year that has been released, 2020, there's a big decline there, right? So unfortunately, right, those kids eventually will be entering TK and kindergarten 4 or 5 years down the road. And so we will be impacted with a much smaller kinder or TK enrollment as we go into 2024 and 25. That may be partially offset by the fact that we're expanding our TK program for all 4-year-olds. So we are offering more slots for all TK, for all 4-year-olds. However, there's likely going to be a smaller cohort of kids that come in. So as we look more specifically at our enrollment, I didn't go back to the 80s, but at one point this district had about 13,000 students. In the 80s, you'll see that enrollment has declined significantly. We're down about 40% roughly when compared to 2004 enrollment. So you'll see there in this most recent year that we completed, we had 7,200 students. We're projecting that number will continue to decline down to 7,000 and under 7,000 in the future years. Like I said, we're going to be bringing back a more formal enrollment report that we have some demographers come in so we can look at the long-term projections and see what they project for our student enrollment in the Monte City School District going out 10, 20 years down the road, right? And that'll really help to inform the planning as we move forward with our master plan, right? And looking at where do we want to invest these bond dollars in which facilities. So as we go through the master plan process, right, we're going to solicit broad input from our stakeholders. Our architectural firm that we've selected to help us develop this plan is here today from Perkins Eastman, and they'll continue the discussion today to begin that first step of getting input from our stakeholders, starting with the board, discussing what that outreach will look like, how we'll go about gathering input, how the development of the master plan will look like. And then they'll talk about the timeline and more or less how long we will need to complete this master plan and what we're going to do when we get to that final point of approval of the master plan. So with that, I can answer any questions, but also like to turn over to Patrick and Kimberly from Perkins Eastman to continue on with the presentation.
All right, I will try not to yell at you. Yeah. But we're super excited to be here, and thanks for having us. Hope you guys have a good session today and good rest of your weekend. But again, super excited to be here. So we're going to go through a few things. We'll introduce ourselves in a second here, but we'll meet the team. It's my little team member over here. I'll try to keep him quiet. We had some parenting challenges this morning, but we'll get through it. But generally, we'll talk about our approach to master planning, how we're going to engage you, how we're going to engage the community, and then our process to develop a master plan. We'll talk about your LCAP projects, that have gone on and how we're going to how those are going to influence the plan. We're going to talk about some survey questions for you all, but generally just to give you an idea of how we approach these projects. But to start, this is us. Josh isn't here. That is not Josh. That's my son, William. These are, we're the three that'll be leading the project. I'm a principal with the firm. My name is Patrick Davis. I've been with Perkins Eastman for about a year. So I used to be actually on the client side. So I was formerly the chief operating officer for the DC school system. So I ran operations and ran facilities for the school system there. And I actually worked with Perkins Eastman on the client side and just had such a lovely experience that I joined them about a year ago, and I've been leading a lot of the long-range master planning projects for the firm.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Coffeen, and I'm an architect and have been doing K-12 master planning in California for over 26 years. I'm an accredited learning environments planner, so I'm really excited to participate in this process. You guys are kind of a flagship of all California school districts, and we look forward to working with you and getting your input. Please use this opportunity today to ask us questions throughout this presentation. We're happy to answer them.
Yep. And Josh isn't here, but you'll meet him the next session. But Josh is a planner that works in our firm and has done a number of master planning projects in California, including Oakland and North Monterey and other places in California as well. But broadly, so Jose mentioned, but we're Perkins Eastman. We're a global architecture firm. So we've got 24 offices around the world, which allows us to actually learn from around the world. So I always like to highlight we're one profit center. So each individual office works under one umbrella, and we're able to share information and work together so that we're all learning from all the projects that are happening, whether they're in Vietnam or in DC or in Oakland or here in LA County. That allows us to really build a good foundation and knowledge base that we can apply here locally. That's not saying we're going to do something we did in a different project and bring it here, but it gives us a good sort of backbone and a sort of foundation to build as we learn more about you. But K-12 is one of our biggest practice areas. We do just about every building type, but K-12 is one of our more established practice areas. So we've been doing K-12 projects here in California and across the country for more than 40 years. We've completed more than 600 K-12 projects. You'll see some of them here in the presentation on this slide. But that equates to over 7 million square feet of projects that we've done around the world. We're really proud, and we'll touch on this a little bit, about our approach to sustainability and really how that impacts the learning environment. You'll see some of the research that we've done to really understand how creating a healthy and sustainable environment actually has positive influence on kids, and we can actually start to incorporate some of that work through this master planning process as well.
So just kind of an overview of the master plan. We're going to be looking at your facilities for the Facility Condition Index. And as you probably know, the FIT standards have been upgraded recently. Based on state funding, we were able to update that. And we'll use that as a baseline to evaluate your facilities. But we also look at educational adequacy. So what you're doing within this classroom space, how does the space support that? That could be furniture, it can be natural daylight, could be acoustics. All of those things affect the outcome of how students learn. And then we'll look at operations with the idea of optimizing your resources. So that's energy, water. In terms of food systems, we know how important just bringing fresh food to your students is, because without a full stomach, it's really hard to learn. And so we're going to be looking at how we can bring that forward. As you probably know, the state of California is looking at all of our buildings being carbon neutral over time, and so we want to make sure that the district is set up to be able to support that idea in the future.
So Jose mentioned a lot of this, so I will not go into detail, but one of the key inputs to this is the enrollment, as Jose mentioned during his presentation. A lot of the master planning is understanding where kids are, where they're going to be, and then how do we align the building portfolio to match where those kids and the needs are and where the programs are. So we're going to, we'll dig into local enrollment at the school level. We'll also dig into regional and state level enrollment, but also understand broadly what's happening in the community. Jose mentioned the birth rates. That is a key input to obviously where kids go and matriculate through the schools. But we also look at a lot of other things in terms of demographic changes in the community. All of these things that happen outside of the school walls ultimately impact the school. So we don't just look at individual schools and what's happening at that school. We pull the lens out a little bit and actually look at what's happening in the community, because like I said, those actually feed into the school. So Demographic analysis is a big part of what we do. It'll be a big part of this project to understand, where the kids are and where they're going to be, and how do we create the buildings to support those kids. And I should also say, please make this as conversational as possible. So ask questions as you're going. You won't insult us if you raise your hand or just speak over us. So just ask questions as you go. We'll obviously pause at the end too, but please ask questions as you have them.
Yeah, and before while you guys were in closed session, we spoke with Jose already about getting the data from your schools in terms of classroom inventory, working with your principals on utilization and capacity analysis. So that's a big part of, justifying where you're exceeding or your enrollment is not matching up with your facilities. So we'll be doing that, and that's some part of the technical analysis is also related to accessibility. Safety is a big part of it, as well as your building systems, how dated those major systems are. And then again, looking at life cycle and operation costs as we plan out potentially those first phase of projects. Those first phase of projects might be the low-hanging fruit that's going to give you the greatest value for your dollar as you look at potentially selling additional bonds later down the years. But we want to kind of capture that low-hanging fruit early on.
So one of the key ways we actually evaluate buildings is actually starting without even thinking about buildings. So the first thing we want to really do is engage the academic side of the house of how do you want to have teaching and learning happening in your classrooms. And our job is to understand the pedagogy and the approach to instruction and how that building can actually support that program and what each individual school or broadly wants to happen. School has changed a whole lot since we all went there. It's no longer sitting in rows of desks with a teacher just lecturing. It's very dynamic and there's a lot of things happening. So early on, we're going to be engaging with a lot of people that are outside of the facilities. That facilities is obviously important. That's the facility master plan. But our job is to understand where you want to go at the district level, instructionally and support-wise, whether that's thinking about the whole child and sort of the social and emotional aspect of school. Then how does the building actually support that? And one of the ways we actually do that evaluation is once we have those conversations, understanding where you all want to go from a instructional and support standpoint, is we actually evaluate those buildings to see how well that building actually supports that vision. So this is, and that is called educational adequacy, essentially how well does that building support your vision of a 21st century learning environment. So a lot of the work we do is looking at boiler rooms and tagging assets and looking at flooring, but this is a really exciting thing that we do, and it's actually coming out of a research project that we're doing. We were recently awarded the AIA College of Fellows Latrobe Prize, which is the largest research grant in the field, and we're partnered with Drexel School of Education to really understand how the built environment impacts kids, and we'll walk through some of that. There's a lot of studies out there to show access to daylight, clean air. All of these things have a downstream beneficial impact to kids. So what we do is we've got a 240 metric evaluation system that will walk around each building. And we look at it, not just from a pure instructional standpoint, but again, thinking about the social and emotional sort of supports that schools need to provide as well. So we look at, the categories are here, but we look at the school presence. So what's that experience that kids and families have as they walk up to that school? That the first impression does make a big difference. So, what are they walking up and seeing? What's the scale of the building? How well maintained it is a welcoming environment. Elementary school districts are a little bit different, but, you don't want kids walking up to a school and it feels like a TSA agent sort of welcoming you into the building. So we've got a lot of systems and questions to understand what's that experience that kids have as they walk into the building. Then obviously we all understand the importance of safety and security. We approach safety and security in a holistic manner. We obviously need to think about active shooters and thinking about, the safety in that sense. But, I oversaw operations for DC, and I can honestly say the amount of things that happen in school buildings on a daily basis in terms of bullying, sexual harassment, things that happen where people can't see, are really troubling. And we have a lot of questions about, is there proper transparency throughout the campus, into the rooms, across the campus where there's proper supervision? Are adults properly dispersed across the campus? So we think about safety and security in a lot of different ways. We also think about the ability to create a sense of community in the school. I think we all learned through COVID that school is, that the social aspect of school is maybe the most important thing And, does the school does the design and sort of the layout of the school allow for creating that sense of community, or is it just a row of classrooms where kids just go from one room to the next? So thinking about the community in that school. How well it organizes the building, so the program placements, where are the support services for kids, are they easily accessible? So we look at how well organized the building. We look at the quality of the instructional space. Are they the right size? Is the volume right? Is there access to daylight? Is there proper instructional technology? All the things that make up a good classroom. We'll touch a little bit more on environmental quality here in a little bit, but we do a deep dive into understanding how well the environment in that classroom supports education. So looking at daylight, thermal comfort, acoustics, and air quality. And then we look at if there's possibilities for assembly in the classroom. And then we look at the campus at large, thinking about extended learning opportunities. I think we all understand these days that learning happens outside of the four traditional walls of the classroom. It can happen anywhere in the campus. So anyways, all that to say, it's a long sort of rambling spiel, but we really do a deep dive into each building to understand how well is that building supporting the kids. So just a little bit more, and we'll go into some of the environmental stuff here in a second, but there was, part of the scope in the RFQ was really trying to understand, where to go from a sustainability standpoint, whether that's evaluating the addition of photovoltaic, so capturing some energy from the sun through solar panels. We're really proud about our work on sustainability and really doing some deep analysis to understand where it makes sense to make some investments in terms of whether you would do PV. The images on here on the bottom and on the right are evaluating different PV arrays, so photovoltaic arrays, to understand what's the potential capture of energy that you can actually get from different types of systems, whether that's putting covered panels over, covered parking with panels on, or other things that we can do. But as part of this, we'll do some evaluation to where it makes sense to potentially invest in some long-term sustainable initiatives. We're really proud of our work with LEED. So we've done lots and lots of LEED projects, which is sort of and CHIPS is another sort of metric and system that schools and buildings can use to understand how well that building is designed to support a sustainable learning environment. We just opened some net zero schools, so we're really, really excited about the work that we're doing. But largely because we really want to understand the impact of those decisions on kids. And some of this is coming out of the research that we've done, but as part of this project, we're going to be measuring lots of different things across the campus. So the image here on the screen is really doing a deep dive in terms of acoustics. Classrooms are loud, schools are loud, kids are loud. Thankfully, mine is being quiet. But it has a huge impact on the ability to learn. There's a stat in the bottom left here from a University of Florida study that showed when noise levels increase in a classroom, students that are learning English for the first time, or English language learners, actually have a 28% reduction in comprehension compared to their non-English language learners students. So controlling those acoustical levels and in the classroom really does have a pretty significant impact on kids' ability to learn. So we'll be evaluating the acoustic levels in the classroom. So we'll be doing that by placing sensors and monitors in some rooms and leaving them there for a little bit, so we can actually measure how well how noisy that classroom is, whether that's nobody in there, or once kids get in there, to understand where there's peaks and potential opportunities to make some targeted investments to perhaps improve the acoustics. Air quality, I think we've all learned about the importance of air quality through COVID as well. But the reality is air quality was really important before COVID. And there's been a lot of work in terms of evaluating the impact of CO2. So CO2 is a good proxy for how well ventilated that space is. And Harvard and other folks have done a lot of work to show that increased ventilation, or actually lack of ventilation or higher CO2 levels, have a detrimental impact on cognitive function. So our ability to process and learn and think critically, which is obviously very important in school. So if we're not able to control that and actually have a well-ventilated space, it actually, the kid may be falling asleep. That's probably not because the lesson is boring. It's perhaps the CO2 levels are too high. So we'll be doing some evaluations of that in your classrooms to see where some additional work may be needed, or hopefully it's measuring fine, but we need to go through this exercise to understand that. Next, we'll look at thermal comfort and daylight as well. So thermal comfort meaning, the temperatures in that room. Anyone who's been in a classroom that's 80 or 90 degrees, it's tough to learn. So understanding how well the temperatures are controlled in that space. And then we'll also do some measuring of daylight and glare. Both those are really important. So access to daylight's really important, but too much daylight where you've got the sun in your eyes, it's really tough to learn. So we'll both look at access to daylight, so the number of windows and access to views, but also how well dispersed that daylight is in the classroom as well. And I say all this to say these are things that we'll be studying and actually potential projects. So if we identify any deficiencies through this analysis, these are potential projects we can identify as potential areas, whether we need to add windows or shade, whatever it is. These are things we can inform future recommendations. And then broadly, we really want you all to make informed decisions. We're going to go through tons and tons and tons of data. And this project is really about aligning your buildings with the needs of your students and your programs and making sure they're working operationally. So the way we do that is a real detailed assessment process where we're going to measure the impact of decisions. So if we're making a recommendation to do X, Y, Z, we're going to give you the data to say, here's the trade-offs of doing that, here's the downstream impact of doing that, whether that's financially or impact on staffing or impact on transportation or impact on operations. This is just a quick snapshot of all the things that we're going to be looking at when we make these recommendations, whether that's a building-specific recommendation or a portfolio-wide recommendation. We want you to be informed of, hey, we're going to make X decision. We need to think about why and all the other letters that come after it. So you really have a really informed, decision to make. You have the data to make that decision, and also the data to go publicly and share why decisions were made as part of this process, whether that's identifying which project goes first or any other portfolio-wide decisions we need to talk about. So Kim's going to go through a little bit more of the process, actually one more on me. So to sort of sum up those previous slides, our job, as we see it, is to really understand what's happening at the district level, whether that's really going through and understanding the demographics and enrollment changes, where kids are, where they're going to be, what the needs are at the facility. We need to think about the operations. If new roofs are needed, it's tough to learn if if there's water leaking through the roof. But then we'll also do that educational adequacy assessment. And then we'll put that through the lens of those sort of measuring the impact. And then we'll ultimately, after we go through that process, come out with a final master plan for recommendations. But Kim's going to walk through a little more detail on how we're going to do that.
This is probably a good time to see if there's any questions on the...
Yes, I have one question. Your analysis evaluation process, what is the length on this, the process? How long does this take?
Well, you're actually at a really good time in that question, because we're actually going to touch on that next. So we'll touch on schedule here in a second.
All right. So great question and perfect timing. So we're looking at a 6 to 8 month process to get the bulk of the work done. We've extended out a little bit further, but the bulk of the work will be done in over 6 months. A lot of that work that we're talking about in terms of evaluating facilities will be happening within this next 2 month period, where we're going to be doing site walks, and we need to time it just right for different reasons. One, we want to see students in the spaces, but we also want to be able to photograph without students in the spaces. So there's kind of working with Jose, we'll be able to work through those sites to get in there. So the first couple months, we're going to be doing a lot of data collection and doing site walks. We have opportunities for engaging the principals at that site walks to talk about critical areas of need, both on their programmatic side as well as the basic fundamentals of their facilities. Then we'll be doing engagement all along this process, which we have another slide that goes deeper into that engagement, because there's quite a lot of stakeholders, and we'll work on customizing those stakeholder groups with you all, and as well as Jose getting more input also at the cabinet level. And then studying of the demographics. When the demographic company comes on, we'll be looking at that information. Developing ed specs with your educational services group within September, October. And then we'll weave in state funding analysis. And throughout that process, we'll be developing concepts and scenarios, and those will be able to be woven into a cost estimate that we'll be able to kind of do analysis on. And along this way, we anticipate probably 4 meetings with you guys, but of course, if you need more in-depth understanding, we can do that. But the idea is to have some study sessions and updates along the way. So that kind of gives an overview of the schedule. And then this is just an example of some of the stakeholder groups that we'll have engaging with the students and families, educators and staff, and the community partners. We'll want to identify those partners that may even be extending up to high school level as well, because students feed up to that level. So you talked about your partners with the high school district. So there's opportunities to bring in multitude of partners as part of this process. Our committees will look at potentially a steering committee, which is at the higher cabinet level, advisory, which is a more broader stakeholder group, and school site committees as well. As I mentioned, curriculum, we'll be looking at educational services, your special ed programs, specialty programs, and technology, and then working through facilities for maintenance operations, transportation, and nutrition services. And then ultimately looking at the opportunities for state, local, and federal funds. And if there is a desire to look closer more at the potential GEO bond, we have consultants we can advise and recommend for that. And so this kind of breaks down the different groups. Again, this is to be customized. So here we're showing you more of a broader concept of the community engagement. Having our expertise and a steering committee with Board of Education at the top. And the advisory committee is intended to be more of a broader group that meets on a monthly basis, that has a better understanding of the district in a lot of different areas of interest. And then at the next level is the school site committees. There could be established a school site planning committee. We can work within your PTA structure. So there's lots of opportunities to engage staff, parents, educators, and communities. Within that grouping, there'll likely be some town halls that get put together, and then we also provide information for back to school night and things like that. So we'll want to engage, a multitude of ways of engagement.
Yeah, I'll just add on to the engagement. I mean, we're not going to take a one-size-fits-all approach to engagement. We know that doesn't work for every community, so coming to a meeting on a Saturday may not work for everyone, or coming to a meeting at 5 o'clock. So we're going to figure out how to meet folks where they are, whether that's tagging on to additional meetings or going to, meetings in, maybe non-traditional community meeting times. We want to make sure we deeply engage with the community, because this is really a process to hear from them and understand where you all want to go, where they want to go, and how the buildings can actually support that. So to do that, we need to, figure out how the best ways to engage, whether that's virtually with some people, whether that's in person, like I said, in different avenues and venues. So we're going to shape that engagement plan with you all to understand what works for the communities here in El Monte.
Yeah, it's kind of I would also say that virtual, as much as we may not like that platform, it actually does allow for more participation and more outreach in some periods, where you can get, maybe in a town hall you might have had only a handful of people, now you get 80 people participating. And maybe they don't necessarily all participate, but at least the information is disseminated and they have knowledge of it. So it's something that we'll be working with you guys on customizing and seeing from your experience over the last 2 years of how engagement works. Oh, I have that. Yes, so crafting the master plan, one of the things that I think is really important is to tie this back to LCAP, because LCAP is what you've already done, your outreach, you've engaged your stakeholders. There's been a collective visioning of and agreement that these goals are important to your district. So what I wanted to do here was to use this idea of look at your LCAP and what does goal number 1 mean for facilities? So increasing student achievement Potentially could be technology integration, maybe more enriched library resources and access to professional development. Where does your intervention happen? Could that be done closer to the students' classrooms rather than further on the campus? And also enrichment programs. If we look at LCAP goal number 2, increase the learning engagement. What I really try to promote is learner responsive settings. And what that does is it allows for, as you know, students learn complex information in a variety of ways based on their strengths of taking in that information. So they may be more tactile, one might be more verbal or, auditory. So there's lots of different ways students learn. So we want to make sure that the classroom setting allows for those different types of learning. So movement, choice, indoor lighting, acoustical design, and one of the things I thought I saw in the LCAP was also the interest in engaging more wellness centers at the campuses. So that, again, increases engagement because it's really supporting the students holistically. And so that brings them into that community in a tighter way. And then increasing parent and family engagement is supporting community liaisons. So where are those community liaisons within the campus? Are they visibly accessible at the entry points, at welcome centers, parent centers as well, and potentially an event center for workshops and training? And then lastly, maintaining foundational supports. The ability to have music within each of your sites is critical to engaging the learner in a different way. Knowing that learning music also influences how well you learn in math, they're directly connected, having those two different brains, ways of learning stimulated. So we'll be looking at optimizing indoor quality, which also affects staff satisfaction. It looks like you have a really great staff that stay within the community, but we want to continue to engage and make sure that the staff satisfaction is maintained. And then you also are engaged in class size reduction, so that affects our capacity analysis as well as improving areas for visual and performing arts to support music.
I think this is our last slide, but I hope what you're getting at least out of this is we don't think of this as sort of just the bricks and mortar approach to facility planning. We really want to deeply understand how you all want to engage with your students and really create the environments that work for the kids. And our job is to understand that and create the building portfolio, or tell you how to create the building portfolio that aligns with that. But one of the key things that we want to do with you all, and we're not going to do it here, so don't feel like you're going to get a pop quiz, but we do want to give you some homework to start thinking about, because one of the things we want to do as part of this process is early on develop a set of guiding principles that'll help us really shape this project. So we want to understand where your priorities are as a board, and then that'll help us inform, and ultimately we're going to have to prioritize a lot of these needs across the portfolio. And having these principles will help us all go back and say, okay, we all agreed that having a welcoming environment is I'm just creating an example here, but that's a really important thing. So we're going to prioritize those projects. But creating a sense of, from the board, what are the principles that are going to guide this process, so that when we're going through that downstream process of prioritizing things, we actually have something to go back to and look at. So one of the ways we're going to do that is actually going to go through the survey. So don't feel like you need to answer these right now. We're going to send you a link. It's just a virtual survey for each of you to fill out individually. And we'll be doing this with you all, with district staff, community members. But all of this data will help us create those set of guiding principles. And one of the next meetings, we'll actually come back and say, here's that draft set of principles that we gleaned from what we received. And then we'll go back and forth on, do these make sense? And we'll chew on that a little bit. But ultimately, we want to really understand from you what makes El Monte a special place. Every school district is different. Obviously, there's great things happening here. So we understand what's actually happening that makes El Monte City School District a great place to learn. So from your perspective, we'll want to know that. Two, more broadly, but why is this plan important? So why do you want to go through this process? Obviously, the last one was done in 2008, so maybe it's just time to do it. But more broadly, why do you want to do this? What, from your individual perspective, why is this process important? And then the third one is really, if we just didn't touch on X, this project would be a failure. So what is that thing that we just really need to think about and touch on as we go through this? We may have touched on the presentation, or we may not even thought about it. We want to hear from you what's going to make this a really important project. And if we don't do it, in many ways, this project may be a failure. And then the last one is probably the most challenging. There's no right answer, but we're going to give you these categories and ask you to rank them. We've done it ourselves. It's not easy. But again, it's going to help us understand where the priorities are across the district. We may get uniform answers from each of you. It may be very different, but we're going to ask you to start ranking some of these considerations as we go. So again, don't feel the pressure to answer these now. We'll send these over through electronic survey, and you'll have some homework to do, and we'll come back to these maybe during the next meeting. So I think with that, that is our last slide, but I'll just end with our tagline, which is human by design. I think you hopefully see as we're talking, we really, really deeply understand and want to understand how the built environment impacts people. In our case, kids, right? It's, the building is the teacher is obviously the most important thing that happens in the room, but the building does contribute to your ability to deliver instruction in the way that you want to do. And sometimes when the building is bad, it gets in the way of instruction, right? So how do we understand, how do we create that optimal learning environment for El Monte? So anyways, again, just super excited to be here and working with you also. We'll take any questions as you may have.
Thank you so much. I think that our district has done an amazing decision in choosing Perkins Eastman. So at this time, do we have any questions from the board? No? I do have a question, though. And you mentioned that Perkins Eastman has been involved in research studies. Would you mind sharing those with our superintendent?
Yeah.
And that way
So
we can have access to those?
We're in the very final stages of the largest one, which is that Latrobe Prize. We'll be wrapping that up at the end of the calendar year. But we do have some other ones. We've got one that really does a deep dive in terms of indoor environmental quality that we can send you. And then we've also done some safety and security white papers and research. So yeah, we're happy to send any and all of that. So we'll send it through the school staff.
Thank you.
I have a question now that got triggered. In terms of security, right, you just mentioned safety. What are some things that you're seeing as, working across, obviously it sounds like the state in different areas with security for campuses and the direction it's going?
Yeah, so that's obviously the question of the times, unfortunately. To be perfectly honest, it's a very complex challenge. But broadly, it is thinking about the experience of the whole kid. You need to think about the active shooter, and you need to make sure your campuses are secure, right? You need to make sure there's limited ability to penetrate the campus without observation. But a key thing in that is actually having transparency. So are the adults positioned properly in the campus so they can actually see people coming? Are they able to see kids that are perhaps bullying other kids in the campus? So transparency is a really big thing. Disbursement of adults is a really big thing. Securing the entrance point is also very important. But my personal response is we need to be careful not to go too far and create a really, really sort of hard environment. Like we talked about, the experience of arrival is really, really important. I worked in DC where many of these kids were coming through neighborhoods and environments that I just couldn't wrap my head around. This sort of the stress that many kids go through just to get to school. In many ways, school should sort of welcome kids with a hug, right? It should be a welcoming environment. And if you push too far where you just have this very sort of brutal, prison-like environment, that does other things to kids that we need to think about. So it's finding that balance of securing the campus, but also maintaining a really welcoming environment that kids feel safe, but also supported. But I can't just emphasize the enough of transparency across the campus that people can see, even just passively. We did a school in DC where we opened a new building, and just by opening up views in the cafeteria, so that people who are passing through there's a 2-story walk, but the ability just that people know that people are actually looking above me and can look down, change the environment of that campus. So even just passive supervision and observation is just really important. So I gave you a really long answer to a really hard question, but I hope it touched on some of it. You just got to find the right balance I don't think there's one magic answer, but
The article that we send you will also shed some light on where the biggest risks are, and particularly transportation, vehicular flows and pedestrian flows are key to safety. So when you read that report, you'll see kind of our perspective that we really want to look at where the greatest risk is. And so as we evaluate your facilities, are there concerns about those crossing over pedestrian and vehicular? How can we manage that different for greater safety?
Thank
did
you.
that, did that session answer it? Okay.
Any other? Mr. Seegers.
You've opened up an area of I'm a linguist, and the thing that I didn't realize was speakers of language are affected differently by environmental sounds. I never even thought about that. Thank you for that. You
Yeah.
opened up another avenue of investigation.
Yeah, I mean, we really do a deep dive in cognitive function and just the neuroscience of being in a building. It's, you know, there's a whole world out there that really, you know, Kim's really involved in neuroscience.
One of the things that was interesting as part of that study is we're designing to the highest standard. So LEED is a very high standard in terms of acoustics, and even that standard is not adequate. So there clearly is a deficiency. So something we should consider. Oh, and as a result of, you know, we don't have the teacher lecturing at the front anymore. We have active learning, we have movement, we have, you know, it's a noisier environment than we've seen. So that also elevates the need for acoustics.
Any other questions?
Well, a comment, we're happy to partner with Perkins Eastman. We had many firms that submitted a proposal to work as our firm that we look to partner with our facility master plan. What we were looking for as a district was a partner that would look beyond the brick and mortar. We know we're going to have to change out the roofs, repaint our facilities, upgrade the plumbing and all that good stuff. And I would hope that you all have heard today from our partner, right, the passion and the lens, that the approach that they bring. They share a lot of the same common vision and goals that we have as a board, as an administration. And so we're happy to partner with Perkins Eastman as we move forward with this very important plan.
Thank you for that, Mr. Herrera. Any other?
I just want to personally thank you for reading our LCAP. It was just so wonderful to see the connections that you've made. I mean, we put a lot of work into creating these plans, and at the end of the day, we want them to be utilized, and you've just definitely set the tone for what's to come. Thank you.
Good. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your session.
Thank you very much. Very excited to see what the future holds for our district. So this was a fantastic presentation. Okay, moving on, we will continue with our board governance and meetings.
As we transition into some governance work, I just want to take a quick moment to do some housekeeping. We have some lunch coming for the board, and so when that arrives, we'll make sure that you have access to it so that it could just be a working lunch, or feel free to take it with you, whatever you think is best. And as soon as that arrives, we'll make sure that that you have access to that.
Thank you for that, Dr. Garcia. So we'll begin today's board governance and meetings with item number 1, governance calendar. And as we continue, I wanted to bring up a small topic on perhaps having taking a step back and consider welcoming remarks for every board meeting that we have, and have that on our agenda. So with that said, my vision for that is really to begin with, to create an ambience to convey meaningful information, to make personal connections with our guests, with our students, our audience, but most importantly, among ourselves, right, as a team. So that's really the objective, the purpose of a welcome section in our agenda. And I would like to open it up if for any suggestions, comments, ideas on this. I would like to open it up for discussion.
I was just
If
going to
any.
say, oh, sorry, I'll sit back here. I think it's good to welcome. I mean, I think that's a great role for you as the board president to kind of, it's beyond just saying, welcome everyone, and this is a meeting. Like, I think that's a nice thing to do. So I think that's, if you would like to do a more extended greeting. I think I just want to, make sure we're always mindful of time and everyone's time, in terms of our audience when we have it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Kopian. Any other thoughts?
Yeah. I know. By the way, I always just look at, because that's our order. That's why I always look at you. Do you want to go first to speak, Ms. Kobian? Yeah, I'm just looking at our board meeting agenda, so I'm not sure if we're thinking of like adding that to our board meeting agenda. I guess I just need more clarification in terms of, I think it's great with the board president doing that welcome. I think that's great that you take the opportunity to greet everyone. You've done a great job with that, setting that tone. I do really appreciate that as a board member, that you've been doing that as president, Ms. Ruedas. I just want clarification with the differences between like the welcome that you're thinking that we each do versus board communications, right? And then there's going to be moments like even board communications, sometimes we have something to share, some things we don't. With the welcome, I would just need more direction between, because obviously there's personal things that we want to share, things that we don't want to share. So how that differentiates between our board communication. Because so far I know you introduced it, and I was feeling hesitant, like, well, what do I share? Because, again, that boundary between things that we want to share with our personal to the audience versus, again, what's private.
Right. And that's a good point, and thank you for that, Mrs. Mendez Garcia, because it is a welcoming remarks, right? I wanted to bring that up so that everyone could have an opportunity, right, to just welcome our guests, welcome our students, right, in a very different way than as what we do in our board member communication section, right, where we're actually reporting to our community, right, what we've done, what we're doing, or perhaps maybe some of the resources that might be available during that month, or what we did. So very, very different from our communication section, right, our board comments.
Yeah. I think what would help is if we do put an agenda, like if we go to, I'm looking at it right now, right, I'm trying to find it. Let me see where it's at. Just maybe explanation. So right now it says, board member communications, right? An opportunity for board members to share information relevant to the board, district staff, and the community. It's a good time to highlight school visits, district programs. So if we do add a welcome, maybe provide a description about how that's different than from our board communication.
And we can definitely do that. Yes. Any other thoughts?
I'll just add, I forgot. That, like the others, I appreciate the way you offer a warm welcome. I also would like just something in front of my eyes so that I can understand how to best use that time for myself if I were to speak up. Because, it's right, the business at hand is the agenda, right? And but if we have something, some sort of descriptor of what it is, how we're to be using that time, then I think that could be helpful. At the same time, I am perfectly fine for you, leading that welcome and leaving it at that as well.
Okay. And that can be another option, right? Just that. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your.
Sorry, just one.
Go ahead,
I think
Mrs.
kind of just
Kobian.
piggybacking on that is, is sort of, I think one person, so maybe either, I don't know what this is, either just having, and I think, I think that's part of the role of the board president is you welcome everyone to the meeting. You can add in any additional information or however you want to do that. If you feel like, maybe at a different time, one other board member instead or something like that, if you wanted to do it more dispersed. I
And
think
that's a
that, because
great
otherwise,
idea.
I'm just, kind of speaking freely, it kind of feels like at a certain point, like, okay, then it's my turn, and I'm saying the same thing as somebody else, and then we don't want it to just be a pro forma kind of like, oh, we all have to say welcome, I mean, and I think it's a really nice, to keep it compact.
And that's another great idea. So thank you for that, and thank you for your suggestions. So we'll definitely come back and put all that in writing. I think that'll be best moving forward. So thank you so much for that. And I will now pass it over to Dr. Garcia.
Thank you. Let me apologize. We're having some difficulties, as you know, with our microphones, and so I think it'd probably just be best if we keep them a little bit of at a distance, and hopefully our voices will be carried. And if at any time we can't hear one another, we'll just flag each other and signal to speak up. So before you this morning, we have some governance pieces that we'd like to share with you. The first one being a governance calendar. We're not approving the calendar, but several board members did ask, is there an opportunity to just look at the year ahead? Because we traditionally approve our board calendar in December, and it's a January through December calendar. So this would be a tentative draft, a tentative calendar for board meetings from January through the end of the school year leading up to our board retreat, our annual board retreat. So something for the board to consider, and if there's anything that we need to look at to move some dates around, we have some time obviously until December, but let us know so that again, you can just plan ahead for yourselves, your family, etc. The second item under that same tab is our 22-23 governance calendar, and this is something that we've brought to you in the past. It just really highlights the work of the board and the things that we should be looking at and considering, and be recipients of information as we do administer testing windows, etc. And so the first item, or the first section there, is governance. And so we start off with this annual board retreat. We have some back to school activities in August, leading it also in September. Of course, there's CSBA that comes up in December. We have elections in November, and so we have begun this wonderful tradition, or we want to continue the tradition of onboarding any new board members that come on board. And then in January, we have our traditional study session where we look at all of our governance handbook and make any corrections or edits. Legislative week happens in March, and then we focus in April and May on board self-evaluation and develop action plan. I think that's traditionally moved to the board retreat. So, just something for us to just propose to you at this time. And if you'd like to make any changes, we can definitely move that around. I wasn't planning on going through every section, but this is something that I wanted to bring to your attention. If there's anything that you'd like to move around, we can definitely do that at the coming board meeting so that we can have a calendar in place. Again, not something we're voting on, but just an overview of the governance actions that the board will be taking and considering throughout the year.
I have a question this is on the superintendent side. When it says the mid-year progress report, is that like in closed session, like on the goals that we've set for you?
It would be, and so based on our previous conversations, we want to make some changes to the evaluation process. And so this is traditionally how a superintendent evaluation cycle looks. We set some goals, there's a mid-year check, and then there's the final evaluation. So again, just proposing some potential timelines for us to consider.
I thought I just had, I don't know if it'd be appropriate here, but I know as an advocacy committee, right, we're also trying to just be more aware of those timelines regarding, the state legislator. Maybe that could be an idea of putting as a column, right, or a row. So then that way we can really easily see, like, okay, as we're planning for advocacy, how that's aligning as well.
That would be good. I will add that.
Just add another page.
I think we could fit another row in that second page. We're good.
Okay.
giving you a few times to look at that, look at the
Thank
governance
you.
calendar.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll continue on with our resolutions.
The next item, actually is as part of our governance calendar, is looking at our monthly board items, or did I? Monthly board items, I'm sorry, yes. And so the idea here is that every month, we have very specific items that we bring to the board, but we consider them routine items, and sometimes they are the same items that we bring, every single month. Sometimes they're yearly and sometimes they're quarterly. So again, here's just another overview for you of monthly items that you can expect in the coming year, 22, 23. And they'll be noted there whether it's, you see it there by month laid out. So for example, in August, we consider our annual membership to LACSA. We bring you a 45-day budget revision. And then there's a couple of resolutions there, which I know we're going to discuss in just a bit, as well as the Williams quarterly report. So once again, this is just an overview of items that will come to the board that are part of our routine items. And if you have any questions, any concerns, any comments, feel free to share those with us.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Garcia.
Concerning resolutions, we're missing a lot of items. We have 13 federal holidays. We don't even recognize or remember Memorial Day. We also leave out a number of ethnicities that, for example, Jewish American Month, we don't recognize that. We don't recognize Filipino American Month. We don't have any resolutions concerning other ethnicities. And yes, we are getting impact from people in our community who do notice this, like Italian American Month. We don't recognize that. Irish American Month, we don't celebrate that. And I'm just concerned about the fact that Memorial Day, we don't even consider that important. Think about it. Our resolutions are too narrow, in my opinion. They're leaving too many things out. We have a huge population of immigrants who need to know about this country, how it was founded. We don't even recognize George Washington. You need to go into your history and read what he sacrificed to help create this country. And we don't even recognize him. Columbus Day, we don't recognize that because some people find Columbus controversial. Maybe we should recognize Columbus Day. It's an actual federal holiday. And therefore, if people don't like what he did or they do like, let people investigate for themselves and find out. I don't think it's proper to simply denigrate people. I've asked children in our community about George Washington. The only thing they seem to know is, oh, he had slaves. That's what he did. Maybe they should know more about the history and how this country began. I don't know if you're aware of the 1619 propaganda from the New York Times, and I don't think the New York Times is considered a very reliable resource for history. 1619 is a big lie, and yet people are buying into that. It's kind of the woke, let's cancel culture. So what I'm going to say in closing is we need to open up our resolutions to really inform people because we educate, I believe we do, and I don't think we should miseducate or ignore a lot of, for example, ethnicities. This country was founded by a huge host of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segrist. Before, I think there's a lot of questions that you posed that I know the board would probably want to consider.
Is your microphone working? I
discuss.
really can't hear.
I'm sorry?
Is your microphone working?
No, I think,
Oh, no, it's too much.
okay, now it's too much, but I'll definitely.
Thank you.
How's
Okay.
this sound? So in order to, if I can just front load this item, so every year we bring forward a list of the resolutions that we are asked to bring to the board. The majority of these resolutions are recommendations from LACO, the Los Angeles County Office of Education. And some of the resolutions, a few resolutions that we've added to this list as a result of the conversations that we've had at this annual meeting with the board. And so I think in order to really address the concerns that you're bringing up, the first thing that we should probably discuss is what is the purpose of the resolution. So there are a few resolutions that we pass throughout the year that are part of a compliance, right? I'll give you a quick example. If you look at the very last page, in December, we do the annual certification of signature resolution, and this is through EdCode. This basically certifies that the signatures on that resolution are the signatures of the Board of Education for the coming year. And the board reorganizes, and so we have a president and so forth, and then that's the resolution that's come forward. And then if you look at the very first example in January, that's a resolution supporting African American History Month. And so from my understanding and the way LACO adopts resolutions, it's basically looking at marginalized communities, people of color, and supporting resolutions to bring about additional awareness, because traditionally there's other areas that are represented throughout our community, throughout our textbooks, and this is a way of bringing more awareness. And so there's not a deficit thinking when these resolutions come forward. The idea is not that we're favoring one group over another. It's just to bring awareness very specifically for something that has been...
Yet the appearance is there. I will simply say, I think one group that does need recognition by us, Jewish Americans. I don't know if you know this, but the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, is putting out the fact that anti-Semitism is on the rise. By us not recognizing Jewish Americans, I think we're doing a disservice to that population. And every population in this country has suffered or still is suffering discrimination. And just simply say, focusing on only 4 ethnicities, I think that's not correct. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but one of our local elected officials for many years, people didn't know this, she's retired, well, she passed away. She was Jewish American. When she told me, your district, our district, will never recognize Jewish Americans. By not doing that formally in a resolution, we're doing a disservice to that population and I think other populations. Thank you.
No, and again, I think there's an opportunity to discuss that. I just wanted to give you a little bit of context. The other thing that I really need to add before opening up the discussion to the board is that the absence of a resolution does not mean that these topics are not discussed in our textbooks, in our curriculum, in our school celebrations, obviously our school calendar, right, in the way we take days off and so forth. And I can assure you, wearing a superintendent hat and a parent hat, that there is an awareness for, important people in history. There is an awareness for why we observe days off, and that happens. That is carried out in our classrooms, and there's a lot of learning that takes place around our holidays and historical figures that are not necessarily part of the resolution. So I think to start the conversation, perhaps we can talk about as a board. What do the resolutions mean to us, right? And the reflection of us as a district.
I will share one other thing. I went to 6 of our graduations, and I call them graduations because linguistically, the correct term graduation is you go from one school to another. Promotion is you stay in the same school. And I'm embarrassed for the fact that of the 6 graduations I went to, none of the children were singing the national anthem. It's not supposed to be a solo by a singer. In fact, only 2 of the graduations I went to, they even played the national anthem. What are we doing for our children for patriotism, citizenship, and love of country? When our children can't even sing the national anthem, there's a problem with that. When I've interviewed a number of high school kids in our community who are saying, oh, I won't go into the military, because there's also this stain upon military service. So I would say we really need to look at what are we doing with our kids? How many children even know the Pledge of Allegiance or what it means? I'm not saying recite it by memory. What does it mean? I think we need to also add something in what we do resolutions is celebrate Constitution Month. We don't even do that. So what are we giving out as a message to our community? Again, I'll go back to this ethnicity. Oh, we have marginalized communities. A lot of them still are. Therefore, we really need to promote among our community growth and unity by everybody has a right to be here, and everybody has a right to be recognized also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segrist. So what would be a next step for this, to come back and perhaps do a study session on those possible and resolutions?
I think now is the time, President Ruedas. I think, this would give us direction for the will of the board to bring resolutions back that reflect the values of the board. Once again, I think there's an opportunity for us to discuss where things fall, right? There's things that are represented in our curriculum. There's things that our calendar is also a representation of our value system, right? So there's different things that are represented in many things that we do. And I think, for me, I would like direction from the board in terms of what resolutions you would like to see so we can prepare them.
Any other, at a distance, any thoughts on upcoming resolutions?
Yeah.
Please, Mrs. Rivas.
Well, I'll begin, but I think we'll probably have a bit of a discussion. I appreciate the passion that Mr. Segrist has for honoring many, many people and people from history, but just the different groups of people that are here in Southern California and in our school system. And I appreciate Dr. Garcia's comments about our values being represented in our curriculum, which is really where the students are engaging, right? The resolutions may or may not have as much impact on what the students are engaging as our curriculum and our school calendar. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that our values, which I think are largely consistent with Mr. Segrist's comments, I think are pretty well represented in those ways, just having had several kids going through our schools. As far as the resolutions go, I like that our current resolution calendar, we actually already have quite a few resolutions per month, and I feel that it may weaken the resolutions that are here if we just fill them out more and more and more. Then it just becomes a laundry list every month of different days or months that we're recognizing. So I like the number of resolutions that we currently have, plus or minus. Also, I like that our resolutions reflect what's happening in the broader culture and community that we're kind of participating in and partnering with other groups who are also recognizing some of these months. I think it just shows, participation and awareness of what some of these current emphases are, which are really important. I also feel that we have really, Dr. Garcia said something that she would like to know the will of the board and come to some sort of, in our discussion, come to some sort of sense of what the will of the board is and how it reflects our values. And I know from our CSBA training that that our decisions really have to reflect all of the values of all of the board members, in as much as, the way we collaborate and come together. When we put out, maybe it was a couple of years ago, and you're gonna have to help me find which month we do this, but February? Okay. Yeah, thank you. International Day in February. That was one way of attempting to incorporate the hundreds of different cultures and countries that we could possibly be represented, even in our community. So I feel pretty confident about that day, and I feel that we can be, as board members, sharing resources regarding International Day, where if people do want to be finding out more about these different countries and cultures, then maybe that's part of what we do, is we provide ways for people to access those resources, that information. So that's my piece. I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Mrs. Rivas. Any other thoughts from the board?
Yeah, I'll go next. This is Ms. Mendez. Actually, I want to actually take it back to our monthly board items document, because we kind of jumped over that.
Okay.
This is an idea I proposed to the board, or what your thoughts are. I was looking at the different items, and when we look at educational support services, I know it reflects both resolutions and also the district work. It's just a recommendation or a personal preference that if we actually removed the resolutions, then that way it's a little bit clearer, and you can just really clearly see, like, October, okay, it's really about the local indicators, or September, it kind of gets lost, those district items, because then we already have something separate for resolutions. So that's just a personal recommendation I have. Again, that's one. And then for the resolutions piece, Dr. Garcia, I love what you said, because I was thinking about the same thing. I think would really be helpful for us, and then also to be transparent with the community, is if we have the purpose, like, what is the purpose? And like 3 bullet points, like the purpose of this, maybe we can also acknowledge that it's not necessary, maybe referencing something like it's very different from like a national holiday. Like, I think that would be really helpful for us as we discuss resolutions, like just 3 points, and then again, to be transparent with the committee. So that's a recommendation I have for our board. The second one is if we put our purpose on the top of the resolutions, and that will help us align. And when we think about it, when we come back to this every year, we go back to that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mrs. Mendez. Any other thoughts?
I have one more thought about that. I think we really should put the resolutions in the media. Facebook, put it out there so people really can begin to realize that there's more out there to learn in life. Life is a learning experience. If you do a resolution and nobody sees it, where does it go? So I was thinking we really should put it in the local media, the newspaper, why not?
So I will share with you the existing workflow after the board approves a resolution.
Okay.
The following morning, Edna sends out a message to all users saying at last night's board meeting, the following resolutions were approved.
But I'm saying beyond the district. I'm saying that we really should do that, because the public needs to know more than just, they need to know what we do. If we just have a resolution in-house, it's not the same as it being expanded out there. And I think people can learn from that just by opening up the idea that this is happening, this is why we think it's important. We educate not just in the district, but even beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segrist. And I would like to just add a little bit to that. I have seen some of the resolutions on social media that have been posted, so that's been great. I don't know if maybe it would be a good thing to post all resolutions, right? Maybe if this is a thought that you're having, Mr. Segrist, but I have seen a few of the resolutions posted on social media.
So I think what we do is we don't take the resolutions and post them. We take the content of the resolution and, create graphics, because there is something, beautiful about celebrating the diversity in our community and creating that awareness that Mr. Segrist is alluding to. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we've traditionally done. If I'm hearing correctly, the idea would be to post the resolution, which I think, Robert is not here, but I would refer to Mr. Dasmati to take that content and present it in a way that can be informative and really can appeal to our followers, so to speak, on social media, so that they can learn from those posts, as Mr. Segrist alluded to.
And Dr. Garcia, or maybe I don't have them, but I don't see May's resolution in what I...
May.
And I know that we have some...
May resolutions go to the April board meeting.
Okay. I do see mental health awareness, so, thank you. Okay, any other thoughts?
I mean, I'll just
Go ahead.
concur and say, I think we've done a good job of selecting, things to highlight. And I think, when we think about the purpose, it's not to say this has to be something that anybody does, but just to say that this is a good time if you want to, read Across America Week or whatever. This is a time when we can, all as a district unified kind of do this kind of work. Not to say that you can't do it any other time of the year. So I like Dr. Garcia's comment about that. It's not deficit thinking about what we're not doing. It's celebrating these things that we are doing. And I think, to Mr. Seeger's point with International Day, maybe it's a good opportunity for us as board members, to share with those people who say we don't celebrate other cultures. We do. We put them, as a celebration of the diversity that we have, as opposed to, singling out 100 different cultures, right? We want to celebrate. That's part of what our district stands for.
Can I just say that I do appreciate that because, our thinking for all things is if you do for one, you need to do for all, right? And there's just to be very consistent. And so if we do start to highlight, other cultures outside of the culture, and I don't want to say the cultures here, but this is beyond cultures, what we currently celebrate. There is that consideration that, we have to really consider lots of different things, and not just cultures, but religions and practices and beliefs as well.
The reason I'm passionate about this, I went to school in community college with a young man who had come out of a concentration camp, who had it tattooed on his arm. And I have received information from the Anti-Defamation League asking that boards begin to celebrate Jewish American Month so that we don't forget the Holocaust, because too many people are denying it. In Germany, for example, it's a crime to deny the Holocaust. And I think that we really need to focus on this. If we really want to stop prejudice, discrimination, we should recognize everybody and not focus on just a few people and then say, well, because these people were marginalized. A lot of people still are. If you look at the attacks on the synagogues across the United States, they're increasing because of lack of knowledge of people in the communities, that everybody in this country deserves respect and recognition. And when you focus on a few, or you have International Day is not enough. We really need to know, because there's a list of all these ethnic holidays. The more you promote, you educate by resolution also. There are people that do go online and they do read what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segrist. And I know that our school district, just as mentioned, this is education that is happening, right, in our schools, right? So, but thank you for that.
You're welcome. I'm done.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Moving on to item number 3, board presentations.
The next item that you have there before you is some presentations that we've slated for the coming year. Of course, there's always an interest to learn from the board if there's any presentations that you would like to see in particular. I'll just highlight a few. We're kicking off the year. August 15th is our next board meeting. We'll talk about all of the wonderful things in preparation for the opening of the school year, as well as our welcome back breakfast later that week. And then we're going to be sharing with you all the wonderful things that took place during the summer. Jumping into, for example, in January, we're going to bring back a facilities master plan update. We're going to share with you where we are and the work that we've done leading up to that meeting. And obviously you heard from our partners today, so eager to really bring back that information, as well as bringing back, hopefully, in person, our service pin recognition ceremony, where we get to say thank you to our employees for celebrating anniversaries. So I just highlighted, obviously, 2 things there. But if there's an interest from the board, to see any presentations, we can discuss that now. We can also bring it forth at the next board meeting so that we can schedule them in and make sure that we're prepared for you. And of course, anytime during the year.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Any ideas, suggestions for upcoming presentations from the board? None? Okay, I do have a suggestion. This is an idea, perhaps a presentation from our community liaisons. And I would like to just, if we can have a presentation of how does that look like throughout our district, perhaps some quantitative data on that. We know that, DLAG and ELAG happens in our school campuses. So to see how parent involvement looks like in our district, I think that would be a very interesting presentation to see.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, parent engagement, I know it's a goal for us as a district, and we can definitely bring back some information on how we're engaging parents, resources, as well as what that looks like, what it's looked like in the past, how we keep evolving those programs. Sounds like a
That
great
would be great.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I would also
And,
say,
Mrs. Kobian.
I like hearing from like the Jeff Seymour Center, getting updates annually from that.
Okay. I'd like to suggest that we invite the people from the dental clinic at the Jeff Seymour Center to come and present to us what they do there, because I think it's something we really should shine and promote is the dental facility at, I just happened to fall into there at one meeting and I said, what is this thing? It's incredible. They even have better services than my dentist does. And I think the public, we can promote that around the community and really, but I'd like to know more about what it is and actually have a picture up here of what is it, what do they have, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sigriston. I see here for the month of October, school safety, right? And I know that is key, and many parents are questioning, and not just in our district, but in every district, and this is globally, right? So with that said, if we can also have a presentation under there about the emergency drills that happen in our school campuses.
That'll all be embedded in that school safety
perfect.
plan. The idea is that, in October, we do earthquake preparedness. We're also going to be revamping our school safety plans. And we have a district-wide safety committee that we're also really activating as the start of the year comes around. In light of just recent events, and there's just always an opportunity for us to continue to improve on our safety protocols.
I have a question in regard to emergency drills. Does a member of the cabinet go to the school campuses when there's when emergency drills happen?
What happens now is our administrators will schedule the drills, monthly drills. And so there are a variety of drills, lock-ins, lockouts, fire drills, earthquake drills, et cetera. And in the month of October, when we participate in the Great Shakeout, that's when we do the observations. And so what we do is we engage stakeholders, local law enforcement officials, as well as people representing our insurance agencies, neighboring districts. And we go out to the sites as they're performing the drill. And then we give them some feedback on how things that they can improve on. And then we collect that data to see as a district, what are some district-wide things that we need to improve on as well. We activate a command center. So it's a very involved process. And actually the purpose of scheduling that presentation is really to share all things safety from the school site perspective, or from the things that we do at the school site as well as the district site. It's pretty evolved, and again, always room for growth.
Wonderful.
And then
Thank you.
two
Mrs.
other
Kobian.
ones, I'm wondering about is maybe health-related things. So from our, our nursing, counseling, kind of hearing where they are with that. And then the other one I was wondering about is, I know we haven't kind of formalized it yet, but equity-based reporting, something for us on, we haven't set specific goals, but I think we're getting to that point. So somewhere down the calendar, where we are in that process as we, it becomes a district-wide.
My apologies, Mrs. Kobian. Can you just say
Oh,
that
sorry.
again? I'm sorry, I couldn't
I'll
hear.
get more over here. I was saying, one, health related, so physical and mental wellness. And then the other was equity. So as we finish up our kind of equity goals for the district, then reporting back on how the process for those being implemented and that part.
So we actually did a little bit of work on this because initially we had departments slated in this document. And then we decided to kind of fold it in. So for example, instead of, community liaisons, it was really about parent engagement because that involves many more people. And so the same thing with the wellness. So what we hope to bring back to the wellness presentation, and that's just to really kick off the year, is all of the supports that we have in place to make sure that people are doing well in our school community. So that would be health and mental wellness combined. So we'll share some of the programs that we have slated. We'll share, some of the metrics that we hope to keep, and then the data that we'll be monitoring throughout the year to make sure that, we're providing these resources for staff and students and families.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Mrs. Kobian. Thank you, Dr. Garcia.
So just to clarify, I will bring back, we'll plug in a parent engagement presentation. We'll plug in Jeff Seymour Family Center update, really highlighting our partners, including the folks that are doing the dental work, which have been tremendous partners. And then we'll bring back a presentation on equity and how we're doing. And I do have some ideas. That's not as evolved, but what I was planning on bringing to the August board meeting is our equity policy that that was where we last left off. And so we'll bring that back. We'll consider it as a first reading, make some edits, and then hopefully a second reading, and then we can start to really plug in some of those pieces. So I think the idea would be to reactivate our equity subcommittee from our summer break, and then move forward with that work.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Garcia. We're looking forward to it. And I've gathered some new articles I will share with you.
Thank you.
On that purpose.
Thank you. The next page there, my apologies, because I didn't give, so if you can disregard that, we're going to update that and bring an updated plan for board meeting recognitions.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Garcia. And now we will move on to our action items, beginning with item number 1, consideration of approval of administrative appointment.
Thank you, President Redas and governing board members. This morning, it is my pleasure to make a recommendation for Dr. Teresa Pinedo as our Assistant Superintendent of Education Services.
Can you use the microphone?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that a little bit better?
There you go. That's perfect.
Okay, good. This morning, it is my pleasure to make a recommendation for Dr. Teresa Pinedo as the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services. Dr. Pinedo has been with the El Monte City School District since the previous century. She started off, it's kind of fun to say, she started off in 1999 as a school teacher at Wilkerson and Potrero School. She became an assistant principal in 2004 and was assistant principal at Potrero, at Gidley, at Frank Wright.
Wow.
And then in 2011 became the principal at Rio Vista School. In 2018, she became the director of instruction. And I will share with you that she was leading the work from the Department of Instruction during a pandemic. So the idea of learning a new job and then learning it during the pandemic is just, I can't even begin to tell you how fun that was all around. But she did an exceptional job, and she has been a leader that has led with heart, with very community-minded, and is always looking out for what's best for kids. She is a wonderful connector. She brings people together, has a great vision for the department, and it is really my pleasure to recommend her this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Do we have a motion for item number 1?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Segrist. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Rivas. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Well, I'm going to say congratulations to Dr. Pinedo, and I
Congratulations
will
to
definitely,
Pinedo.
we will be sharing this announcement with our school community, and we will put her to work right away
Perfect.
as the start of the new year unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, congratulations to Dr. Pinedo. Moving on to item number 2, consideration of approval of administrative appointment. Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, President Rivas, the governing board members. It is also my pleasure to make a recommendation this morning for Cherie Luna as an assistant principal at Durfee School. Cherie comes to us with just a wealth of knowledge and experience. She's currently a teacher in the Duarte School District, having been a ELD coach, a TOSA, a bilingual teacher in many different settings. She's very passionate and committed to students, to student outcomes, specifically focused on family engagement and how to really make sure that families are connected to the work that we do at schools. It is a pleasure to recommend her this morning to you all.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Okay, do we have a motion for item number 2?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Mrs. Cobian. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mendez. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, we will move on now to superintendent updates. So for that, we'll pass it over to Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, President Rivas. I really want to begin by appreciating each and every one of you and your time. You know, the idea of a Saturday morning does give us the opportunity to just stretch out some of the topics that were pending for us. And so I do appreciate all of the time that you put into our meetings and the work that you do in leading this district, and in particular this morning. Really excited about the topics that we've covered and looking forward to a very successful school year. One of the things that I wanted to address in my update this morning is the return of the school year with COVID protocols. And as our, you know, I want to say history, as the past practices have shown us that, you know, this pandemic has been very fluid from day one. It continues to be very fluid. I think back to that first summer when we were making plans to come back, and we had our measuring tapes out, and we were really making sure that, you know, there were 6 feet apart. All desks were 6 feet apart, and then we were given notice that all schools would start in distance learning. And so if you would have asked me in June, what do you think will happen for the upcoming school year? I would have said, okay, you know, we'll have a plan and we'll be ready to go on July 30th, hence why we scheduled this update here. And so in the last few weeks, there has been a surge with COVID cases, as you very well know. And we were waiting for an announcement from the Department of Public Health on Friday. We were told that there was going to be a mask mandate in place. And so the announcement was going to be very important in terms of our planning and making sure that, you know, once again, our protocols are in alignment to the Department of Public Health. On Thursday afternoon, we received notification that the Department of Public Health was not going to make an announcement. They were predicting or projecting that the surge was going to start to decrease in the coming weeks, and they wanted to wait to see what those numbers look like before they imposed a mask mandate. And so we are once again in that holding pattern of really wanting to make sure that we have all of the information so that we can say this is what it'll look like. And please know that as we meet, we already are planning for different scenarios so that we can continue to do what we've done. I'm very, very proud of the direction that we've taken as a district. We have been a little bit more on the conservative side, but we've always been in alignment to the Department of Public Health. We've followed the strong recommendations that they have put forth. And as a result, our school community has been safe, relatively safe. Yeah. Infections have happened outside of the school and not necessarily in the classroom. And those few that did happen were really outliers. And so the goal is to really make sure that we continue to prioritize the safety of all students and staff. And we really want to take into account where Department of Public Health, the recommendations that DPH will make as we call what the start of the year will look like. So I hope to bring some information to you in the next week or so, and really want to connect with our partner school districts to make sure that there's an alignment. You know, we share siblings, as well as making sure there's an alignment to any direction that the Department of Public Health is going to be leaning into. And then our goal is to really message this information to our families as soon as possible. So my apologies, because I'm, we're not necessarily calling what the start looks like, but there is a commitment on our end to plan for different scenarios so that we're ready to go.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Any questions with regard to the update? I do have to say that, thank you for your memos and that frequent communication that you have and keeping us up to date with all the new information that comes up. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. If I can just add, I know that we'll meet once again before the start of the school year. But just to give you a quick update, we are busy hiring. I think we're pretty much complete with most of our hiring. We are doing our on Monday, we start the second part of our professional development with our administrators. It's been a wonderful summer of PD as well for teachers. Our teachers have signed up to do a variety of, participate in a variety of PDs, some that I was able to attend this past week, and it's just been wonderful. The turnout has been great. Our facilities are looking wonderful. Classrooms are clean. School spaces are clean. We're really excited to welcome the students back. And so we're on track and just ready to begin our year. Our theme for this year is Together We Rise, and it just represents where we've been and where we're headed. We're going to continue to do tremendous work because we're all in it together.
I love that. Let's hashtag it.
Yes.
On those postings,
Together
Together
we
We Rise. It's very important. And definitely, that's only the way to go, right? If we're together, if we're in unity, we are stronger, definitely. So with that said, thank you for the update, Dr. Garcia. And I think we're now ready to adjourn our meeting. So today at 12:03. Thank you.
Thank you. I think lunch is in the hallway, so please feel free to grab some lunch on your way out, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
And kudos to those who put this together. This was beautifully
All
done.
Edna. Kudos to
Wonderfully
Edna for
done.
being fabulous.
Thank you, Edna.
Okay. Really beautiful job.